Hi everyone, and welcome to English 10. This is a discussion of the art of rhetoric, and for this week we will be defining, recognizing, and utilizing rhetorical terms. We have a quiz on Monday, so I thought this presentation might be helpful to you in reviewing all the different terms you need to know. Let's begin. First, at the core of this unit is the question of, do you know rhetorical terms? How are they used? And more importantly, why are they used? Why would a writer use these rhetorical terms? How do we notice them? What are we looking for? So we want to make sure we focus on the terms, how they're used. Perhaps you want to take the quiz at the end and see how many you can see. But most importantly, why would a writer choose to use these rhetorical devices in their writings and speeches? So in the back of your mind, please think, what are they doing? How are they doing it? And why are they doing it? So what is rhetoric? Let's look at our picture right here. We have a speaker or a writer who is standing up or presenting and is trying to convey an idea or message. And the messages have to be received by lots of different people. So he uses lots of different rhetorical devices. So the writer says, gee, what can I do to help the people listening or reading what I write understand what point I am making, what message I wish to send to them from me to you? So we do have a quiz on that, some suggestions of how to prepare for it, make some flashcards of each term with definitions, review the examples given, try to create your own examples, and that's the best way to do it because then you really know the terms, and then take the practice quiz. If you've done all that, you'll be well prepared not only for this week's quiz, but for using these rhetorical terms in your discussion of writers, particularly in helping you understand the writer's purpose or the message he or she is trying to convey. So the first term that we have is the overarching one. It's the word repetition. Because we say something over and over and over again, we repeat it. Now the question is why do we do that? Well, first, what is it? It's the conscious and purposeful replication of words or phrases in order to make a point. And there are many different forms, and many of the rhetorical terms that will follow use a different type of repetition. Sometimes they're repeating a word in the beginning of a sentence. Sometimes they're repeating a phrase at the end of a sentence. Sometimes they are repeating a whole structure. But repetition is really at the essence of many of these rhetorical terms. So always remember that when we're looking at something, we're saying, yes, it is repetition, but is it a particular type? And why is the writer choosing that type over another type? So here's an example. I ain't draft dodging, I ain't burning no flag, and I ain't running to Canada. I'm staying right here. The repetition of the phrase, I ain't, says that's what I'm not going to do. And notice once again by the use of slang, I'm connecting with an audience that speaks that way or wants to hear the voice of someone who's not educated. And then I'm staying right here. Notice there's no G there. I'm staying right here. It's the contrast. I'm not doing that. This is what I am doing. So the contrast between ain't, and staying, the repetition of those helps us realize the decision or choice the speaker has made. The next one is called an anaphora. It's the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive phrases, clauses, or lines. So again, it is a form of repetition. But where is this form? It says, to raise a happy, healthy, and hopeful child, what do you need? Well, it takes a family. It takes teachers. It takes clergy. It takes business leader. It takes community leaders. It takes a village. So the repetition of the phrase, it takes, connects to the audience saying it takes all of us, this whole list of people. And you are among that list, so it takes you, and you. Therefore, the repetition of it takes talks about how the community, all these different people, must work together to achieve this goal. Another example of an anaphora is a very important one, December 7th, 1941, which is actually tomorrow's date. December 7th, that is. And FDR gave in his speech following the attack on Pearl Harbor, a very important speech to the nation on the 8th, actually. And he used certain constructions. He used an anaphora. Listen, he said, last night the Japanese did this. Last night the Japanese did that. Last night they attacked this. Last night they attacked that. Last night, attack. And therefore, what must we do this morning? We have to do something. What they did last night demands a response today. Contrast. Here's another type of repetition, but this one, it's instead of adding words, it's taking words out. So we're not repeating words, we are eliminating words. It's the lack of conjunctions. So it's reverse repetition, so to speak. Okay, so it's ascendenton or ascendenton. Okay, and what we're doing is we're taking out words. Be one of the few, the proud, the Marines. Now, why would we take the words and out? Be one of the few and one of the proud and one of the Marines. Why would we do that? Because the writer wants us to put those words so close together that we're hearing in our heads, few, proud Marines in one breath. And therefore, if I want to be a Marine, I'm among an elite group, and I'm going to be a person who is full of pride and is very proud, and people will be proud of me. We hear those words so close together. So the writer, once again, is using the lack of conjunctions to achieve a goal. So here's another example. So you meet this person, boy, are they fine, kind, sensitive, loving, witty, charming, intelligent, blah, 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 blah. By taking out the conjunctions, and they are fine and kind and sensitive, once again, the long list says, let's put all this list together. This person needs to be all of these things in one breath. It's not a long thing they need to be all of it tightly woven together. A euphemism is another example. It's a substitution of an agreeable or at least a non-offensive expression for one whose plainer meaning might be harsh or unpleasant. So we really don't like unpleasant experiences. We try to make them sound more positive. So in the example here, it says we're going to steal the ship. And the answer is, well, we're not exactly going to steal it. We're going to commandeer it. It's a nicer word for stealing. Or the other one, the baby made a BM, or another word which I won't repeat. And then it simply says, the baby made a poo-poo. We're trying to make something sound light and not offensive or harsh to our ears. It changes the attitude or tone towards what we are talking about or what we are doing. So here's another example of a euphemism. Eddie Murphy writes, yeah, I was going to say fat, yeah, but big is better. Yep, that's what it is. Notice how the word big is considered less offensive or harsh than fat. When you visualize fat, you think of marbled fat, you think of something that is excess. But when you think of big, it's grand, okay? So it changes something negative into something less negative or even sometimes positive. A polysyndeton, again, poly meaning many. With the first one, we took out the conjunctions. Well, now we're going to put many more conjunctions in, many more than we actually need. So we add these conjunctions for a reason. So let's look. So Vince Lombardi says, what do you need? It's more than a game. And regardless of what level, it demands. What does it demand? Courage and stamina and efficiency and all of this. All. And. Notice the heaviness. The sentence gets heavier and heavier and heavier. You need to have all of that. This is a weightiness. In order to really do this, that's what I need. So the weightiness is what we want. Another example, a pattern, once again, they're repeating conjunctions, and let's see why. We must change that deleterious environment of the 80s, that environment that was characterized by greed and hatred and selfishness and mega merges and debt overhang. Notice the and this and that and that. Again, it's the heaviness of it all, so we have to change the heaviness into something lighter. Not greedy, not full of hate, not selfish. We want to change it from the heaviness, from the negative, into the positive. Here's the next one. Okay, it's anadiplosis, and it's the repetition of a word or words in a clause in such a way that the second clause starts with the same word that ends the first. So, for example, you must make every effort to support your faith with goodness, and goodness with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with endurance, and endurance with godliness, and godliness with mutual affection, and mutual affection with love. The repetition of the word makes us hear all of the words twice, and by hearing them twice, we hear the echoes of the things that are important. Goodness, we need goodness, but we also need linkages. We can't just have goodness. We need goodness to be linked with knowledge. We need knowledge to be linked with self-control. So we need the linkages, and we need the repetition. We need all of it. So here's another example. Repetition of the same words in successive clauses. When I give, I give myself. I give. I give. Repeating the giving. Who's doing the giving? I am. And what am I doing? I'm giving. Parallelism is a very common one. You give two or more parts of a sentence a similar grammatical form or structure, and that gives the whole a pattern. So what are we doing with space? Well, we're going to explore strange new worlds. We're going to seek out new life. We're going to boldly go. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do the third thing. The emphasis on is what we're going to do. There's the repetition of the parallel structure. Another example of repetition. Things we've petitioned, it says here. We've petitioned and we've entreated and we've begged and we've mocked. Notice how the pattern changes. We're not going to do that anymore. We're no longer going to beg. We're no longer going to entreat. We're no longer going to petition. We've gone from have petitioned to beg no longer. Contrast. A paradox. What's that? Well, it's an assertion that's seemingly opposed to common sense, yet may have some truth in it. So here's an example. The next time I have a daughter, I hope it's a boy. Well, you can't have a daughter and be a boy, so that doesn't make sense. It's a paradox because what he's really saying is, I would like my daughter to be less complicated, to be more like a boy. So the idea that it's easier to raise boys than girls does make sense, and he wishes for a daughter who has perhaps in temperament or desires less complicated ones than his present daughter does. That makes sense. How is this another one example of a paradox? Well, this is from Matthew in the Bible. It says, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Well, sheep can't be like a snake, and it can't be as innocent. So one of the things what's happening here is we're saying be a sheep, but in the next breath be shrewd, yet appear to be innocent. These are oppositions or opposing ideas. It's a paradox. An antithesis is, again, contrasting relationships between two ideas by joining them together, often in parallel structure. To err is human, to forgive divine. Notice the parallel pattern. Human traits of making mistakes is contrasted with the godly virtue of forgiveness. This is an antithesis. Another example, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Notice the opposition of heaven and hell, the contrast between reigning, which is being king-like, and serving, which is servant or subordinate-like. Litote is one that we often use. It's an understatement. It's generated by denying the opposite or contrary of the word which otherwise could be used. It's often called a double negative. So, for example, if the house is not unclean, double negative, then it is clean. If your apartment is not unclean, well, then it is. Another example. I am not unaware how the production of the Grub Street Brotherhood have of late years fallen under many prejudices. You're not unaware? Well, you are aware. It is an understatement. Metonymy is replacing the name of an item with the name of something else with which it is closely related. So, the writer's words we're going to replace instead of the writer and what he's writing with the word the pen. And what happens with these words, sometimes they actually cause pain to someone. We're going to talk about as if it's a sword. So the pen is mightier than the sword. So sometimes here, once again, they're telling us that the pen, words can be just as painful as the forces, the blood, the stabbing that a sword inflicts. Interesting use of metonymy. Another example, trouble on Wall Street. It really means problems on Wall Street or problems with the stock market. And lend me your ears from Julius Caesar. Well, it doesn't really mean your ears he's asking to be lent. He's simply saying, hey, listen, please. An epistrophe is the last word or set of words in a sentence, clause, or phrase that's repeated one or more times at the end of successive sentences, clauses, or phrases. So notice, hold your ground, hold your ground. We hear the word ground, ground. And then again, it's not this day, it's not this day. So today is not the day, because today we're going to hold our ground. Another example, the last few words or phrases is repeated at the end of both sentences. I want you to remember that no bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor dumb bastard die for his country. For his country, for his country. Patriotism is the theme that's being echoing here. And what do you do for patriotism? You don't die for his country, you make the other person die. You win. An expletive is a figure of emphasis placed near the beginning of a sentence in which a single word usually interrupts normal speech. It's used to lend emphasis to the words on either side of the expletive. So we're emphasizing what you are about to say. Just in case you were dozing off or not listening, says, hey, make sure you're listening. In fact, it's a conclusion I'm coming to. Of course, as you know. To be sure, yep. Indeed, I suppose, you know, you see. Certainly, remarkably, you go, yes, yes, I hear you, I hear you. The example would be, I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey. Getting permission here, but also reminding you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you on a journey. Please come with me. The minimum wage, I might add, is far less than it was in the 60s and 70s in terms of purchasing power. Notice the use of the phrase, I might add. By saying that, I'm saying, hey, focus on the word minimum wage, minimum wage. It is very different now and then. Once again, contrasting 60s and 70s. Its purchasing power is less. The next one is aposiopolis, and I think I said that right, aposiopolis. It's a figure of speech in which the speaker breaks off abruptly and leaves the statement incomplete, as if the speaker is too filled with passion to state what's on his or her mind. So the reader could add a word sometimes. We fill it in because the speaker is so upset, so upset. Here it says, well, I said if I could get hold of you, I'd do something. And we just recognize the anger, the frustration, the irritation, and we just, in our own minds, envision a word. Another example, it says here, I'm so angry I could, what could I do? I don't know, but I'm thinking of some students right now. I'm so angry I could. An ellipsis has different uses. So one of the uses it's to give the reader a chance to fill it's an omission of words, but sometimes the reader fills in the gaps, and sometimes we use it for connecting. So sometimes we use it for what we call interruption, meaning pausing, and sometimes we use it for connecting. It's an interesting rhetorical term that has two different purposes. So in formal writing, we can say it's trailing off. If only she had, I don't know. If only, I don't know, it doesn't matter. I'm just, or hesitation. I really wasn't, you know what I mean. I didn't really mean it. After school, I went to her house, then came home. Yeah. Or the other side of it is when I'm putting two ideas together and I need to connect them. And the reason I want to do that, there's a lot of other writings there, but I want to emphasize the relationship between these two ideas. So Thoreau, in this particular example, says, if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and lives a life that's imagined, well, if I do that, ... ellipsis, I'm going to live with the license of a higher order of beings. So I want to make sure that you realize that, as Thoreau says, these two ideas, and I'm putting them together. If I do this, if I live in the direction of my dreams, then I'm going to have a happier life. I'll live in the higher order of beings. Rhetorical questions, most of you know from Macbeth, where he does in all of his soliloquies, he asks questions. Is this a dagger which I see before me? Its handle towards my hand? Question mark. We don't expect an answer. He's just raising questions. Could this be an illusion? Could this be real? So rhetorical questions do not demand an answer. They're questions which make the reader or listener or viewer say, gee, what is he thinking about? Or what is it he's thinking about in terms of a choice or a decision? We have the questions in our mind. Is it a dagger? Is it real? Should he take it? Here's another example here. It says, can anyone compare the state of economy when the Carter administration took office with where we are today? Well, we don't want an answer. We want, can anyone do this? Can anyone do that? Let's have 4 more years of this. Do you really want that? These are called rhetorical questions. Another example, how do we allow the rich and powerful to rip off people as consumers, but not to continue to nip them off as taxpayers? It's a question. And you, the reader, viewer, listener, has to say, gee, what's the answer to that question? How do we allow that to happen? What should I do? Should I vote for somebody else? Should I take action? Should I write to someone? What should I do? The question is designed for the reader, viewer, not for the speaker. So, quiz time. Now that you know all these terms, let's look at the final quiz and check your answers. And I hope you get them all right. Our real quiz will be on Monday. Please remember to study, review, take a practice quiz. Here's the quiz. Here you go. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. So let's look at them. First one, minimum wage, I might add. Japanese government, last night. Ever won a war by dying for. And this one, so you meet this person, they're A, B, C, D, E, F, G. What's missing? I was going to say fat, but no, I don't want to say fat. I want to use the word big. I give. Did you remember any of the ones we talked about? Remember any of the terms? Can you spell them? Can you define them? Here's the next ones. I'm sending you out like sheep. Let's put them all up, and then we'll look at them. Remember the sheep among wolves? Yet, if you have sheep, how can you be a snake? And notice the environment, greed and hatred and selfishness, and. And then the questions. How could we ask these questions? Do we really want an answer? And our petitions, we have done this, we have entreated, we have begged, but now, no more. We beg no more. We entreat no more. Contrast. And then, to reign in hell, then serve in heaven. And finally, notice, I am not unaware. Maybe because I am aware. And I'm so angry, I could do, I won't say what. Here are the answers. Check yourself. And I'll see you soon. And good luck on the quiz on Monday.